Shanti, Shanti, Shanti. May it serve all being. I'm so happy to see everyone. I thought I would talk about that which is beyond division tonight. Um, you all have heard me say so many different times. I have very little to say, actually, and mainly one thing. Remember who you are. Everything else is, will fall into place. So I just kind of try to say it in as many different ways as I can, and in that we all can bring what we're all what's unfolding within each of us within that context of remembering the truth of who we are, the shared true nature. And in this way, we continue to permeate the consciousness that has not remembered as of yet. So this was something that we read a lot out of at retreat, and I wanted to continue with that. Just to get us started here, Meister Eckhart, he of course uses the word God and Godhead because that was the word that was the word for the animating, maintaining, sustaining that principle, whatever you want to call it, that which animates, source, love, however you, truth. But he uses God. This is called your true beauty. I've said this many times and in many ways. You must die in order to live. You must live so that your whole life is love, and let go of all that you are, relinquishing everything. For only then can you ever hope to discover your true self. This confuses the fearful, worries the proud, and offends the powerful. I just love that sentence. This confuses the fearful, worries the proud, and offends the powerful. And you'll only begin to grasp it when you let go of all you think you are and all you hope to become. Abandon your false self and cast yourself out into the fathomless, unknowing depths of the Godhead, beyond every image and thought you might have of God. For only there will you find the beauty within you, which reflects the godness of God. You must live so that your whole life is love, and let go of all that you think you are, relinquishing everything. Division the apparent division, the appearance of it, that we think of as out there, the them, the they, those guys. begins here in the perception of division within one's own self. A division that we have called me. This separate, isolated concoction of beliefs and ideas and opinions and an apparent body mind walking around and all of that. And that division begins and is founded on that separate sense, that self we think we know about, that keeps us safe and secure and has a position, one that it can defend. That all begins and is founded on a belief, and it comes in a few different flavors, but it always is about not good enough, unworthy, everything else. I've even spoken with people who had a very strong, direct experience of oneness and the love that everything is, and were still holding themselves outside of that, even though it was a dramatic, direct experience of oneness. There was still some one outside of that perceiving the oneness and was not being invited in to the wholeness. And if we stop narrating and all referencing and using all the tools to keep ourselves separate and apparently real, the false self appearing real. If we stop just for a moment and begin to inquire into, this me, we almost always, I'm sure there's some exceptions, but almost always bump into this sense of not enough, failed, cast out. Even if we can start bringing some things home to the love, there's still those parts that are too shameful, too hidden, too whatever it is for you. We each kind of have our own flavor, but trust me, it's the foundation of separateness. I mean, it's kind of astounding, really, how even in the wake of, like I said, a very direct sense of all is well, all is God, all is love, seeing manifest reality as a kind of wholeness, of a oneness, and it can be very like dramatic, where you see things for what they really are, not what we've named them to be. Even in the wake of that, there can still be this withholding, because, like, as Meister Eckhart said, the first line of Your True Beauty, I've said this many times, and in many ways, you must die in order to live. And it sounds very dramatic, especially to Westerners, I think, and our big fears of physical death and all of that. As we try to intellectually understand something that is of a spiritual nature, it's going to be scary to the intellect, and we're also kind of aloofly intellectual, like we're all kind of coming in, we're recovering addicts to the separate self. We're addicted to the separate self, and we're recovering from that, but we got a ways to go, and we still kind of hold ourselves at, even if we don't realize it, the intellect has become God, you know. And so if the intellect tries to bear upon existential type experience and questions, it gets very scared because it can't understand it at all. It's not understandable in an intellectual way. I mean, you know. So anyway, there can still be these very subtle divisions within, subtle withholdings, because the egoic structure, the small self, the belief in separation, however you want to talk about a sense of division that feels like meanness, me as in something separate than everything else. As that begins to deconstruct, there can be a sense of death. You must live to die, you must die to live, as he says. And so it will pull out all of its best, most seductive, and it's not in a strategic, evil way, like I'm kind of speaking about it. I'm just being kind of like it's a little imp in there. No, it's just, it's conditioned, habituated survival. Conditions, habituated survival mechanism that says you must have this belief in order to survive. It boils down to it. It boils down to that sense of what am I? What will I be? It's very existential. And then our intellects try to come to bear upon that. And it just spins and spins and spins and spins and spins in thought and belief and emotion and thought and belief and emotion. And whatever thoughts and beliefs most reinforce the position that one is somehow not able, not worthy, not enough. I got to do all of this. I got to maintain this song and dance, you know, or uh, and what I'm trying to get to, what I'm trying to point to here is that that is the root of division. It may seem like division is something totally other than that, like, you know, oh, the world is divided, countries are divided, our communities are divided, our families are divided, you know, there's a division in values and all the rest. But that's how it reflects in physical manifestation. That's how division reflects. But the roots of it are within a inner division, the division called me, separate, the separate self. That's the root of it's the only I don't know the right word. It's the belief that begets all of it, all of the disharmony, dis-ease, division. That's it. That's it. Even if we no longer believe it, which probably most of the people on this call, It's not a really strong belief anymore. The direct experience has shown otherwise. There are like pools, like, okay, so maybe most of the life is in the current of, I will not be moved, and I am that I am. There are, little mud puddles where the water has, drained off into a little cul-de-sac over in this little unconscious area, or this little unconscious area, or this little unconscious area. And it's not bad. It's just as the mind, heart, mind, however you want to think of that, the mind of the heart of the mind becomes illuminated, all of that begins to come home, and join in the river that is the direct way to source. It is as it is. It is as love. It is as truth. It is as God. It can seem like a small thing when the view is very turbulent, let's say. All of the stuff, the reflection is just like so vividly turbulent. The appearance, as Byron Katie says, the false evidence appearing real. The false evidence appearing real can be just like super seductive. And it can seem like a small thing, or like how could that possibly affect this big show? To just stop, go in, say a prayer or intention, or just whatever word works best for you, devotion, discipline, commitment, I don't know, practice, and get quiet, still, and recognize, at whatever capacity one has in a particular moment, recognize that which is amidst and amongst all the turbulence, but in and of itself is at rest. At rest. At rest. Because then the at rest unconditionedness, at restness is unconditioned. It's that they're the same thing. It's unhabituated, it's unconditioned, becomes a vehicle for that which is love. It's not trying to be love. It doesn't need circumstances to be love. It doesn't need an object to love. It is love. And when the mind is quiet and is no longer forming itself in as these appearances of well, let's just use Byron Katie's false evidence. It is an avenue. It's an avenue for awareness itself, love itself, truth itself, And there's nobody in there saying, well, now I will bring that to bear upon what I see out there in front of me. It's no longer like that. It's a complete unknowingness. It goes against our sense of doership, ownership, intellectual what is it called? Savvy, prowess. Not that any of that is a bad thing. The evolution of the intellect is a beautiful thing when it's in service as a function of, what do we want to call it? Spirit, awareness, the heart, love. Then it serves very naturally, without a bunch of ideas of what should happen. It I was a rebel to the core. Rebelliousness felt like freedom to me for many, many years, until I realized that rebelliousness was just running me around like every other conditioned pattern. And when when the unknowing quality of unconditioned, uncaused love, mind, whatever you want to call it, heart, began to drive to the change in occupancy. It became the driver. It became the context for all the content, consciously aware of itself as itself. All those remnants of and your patterns are your patterns. It doesn't have to be rebelliousness, but I'm just using this one as an example. All the remnants of that would still come flashing forward in really heated up situations. This sense of well, if I don't stand either for or against something, the whole thing's gonna go to hell. It just isn't true. One can just stand presently, present as right here, right now. Stand, like we were saying at retreat, I will not be moved. And that which informs will make itself known through next obvious move, next obvious move, next obvious move. What I have been calling responsive immediacy for the last few years. And I don't know if it really resonates with very many people. Help me for a better word. But responsiveness that is in service is too much, but I'm going to say it, in service to the animating power, the one creative animating power. It's at the service, because it's not separate. It can't find edges, it can't find positions, it can't find Does this mean that like all the turbulence and the war of good and evil doesn't look like that? No, it looks like that. It looks like that. But there is an absolute knowingness that it starts here. Because there is no other place. So, you know, here, what very spontaneously started coming forward, and I think it will just be your own version, your own flavor. I didn't know Ho'oponopono was a thing. I didn't know that. But what would start coming forward in those situations is, oh, I'm so sorry. Like just a sense of deep sorrowfulness at just the wholeness arising as the battle of good and evil, inseparable and not apart in any way. And it would just be, I'm so sorry. And then I remembered that Dr. Hawkins had always said, you know, this too I surrender, this too I surrender to thee. I am a being of light and I cancel this division. I no longer need it. I no longer need to see this. You're not denying it. I'm not slapping a spiritual bypass of like, oh, it's all good. We're all good. Do you hear the difference? There is a difference. There is a difference from how the ego still is very involved in good and evil, even when it's saying something like it's all good. There is no position, good or bad, or, you know, as Shakespeare said, nothing is good or bad, but thinking makes it so. There is their natural responses to disharmony, hatefulness, for sure. Does it surprise the intellect? Most of the time. Because it's out beyond good and bad in that field that Rumi talks about. I'll meet you there. I'll meet you there. I'll meet you there. These are, if all of this is heard from a very egoic stance, which there's no blame or shame in any of that. They're just like, there's sometimes where the very conditioned aspect of a mind, body can listen to something like this and be like, you know, how can there be no good and bad and all of that? And I just encourage you to deeply inquire into those questions from an unconditioned, quiet, curious, open field listening place. And let spirit respond. So it would be rise from the ground up rather than the intellect down to answer these kind of existential questions. Because until it's a direct experience, it sounds really it can be difficult, I think, until it's a direct experience to discern between spiritual bypassing and what I'm trying to talk about tonight. There's just a very natural, beyond personality, not Jennifer's personality, which is, what it is. It's what it is. Preferences and like, are you kidding me? And I mean the whole thing. But there is this responsiveness that just it overrides and makes that so irrelevant. It just doesn't even come. It's just irrelevant. There is this responsiveness that is, I mean, the ego would look at it as taking ultimate responsibility and kind of like an ego, kind of like a God complex or something, because there's nothing outside of oneself that you can like push onto somebody else. But there isn't this like victim in there absorbing all the consequences or a martyr of the world. It's not that. It's not that. It is a coming, a consciousness that comes to bear upon itself in a way that's like, oh, please forgive me. I was unconscious of that until right now, but now I see it and I no longer need to see it that way. I surrender that. I surrender division. I surrender war. How much more do we need? How much more data on war do we need? Like before we finally kind of wake up from that. So it can seem like to beginner's mind or to our sense of like sophisticated spiritualness, oh, I've realized this, I've realized that, I'm enlightened here, this, that, the other thing. The kind of going back to basics, which is to stop. Through meditation, contemplation, inquiry, however it happens for you. I know for many of you, it's like being in what we call nature, which is our nature. The reason we resonate with it is because it's silent, which is our true nature. Silent. But however it happens, find that it's like a vacuum, right? I know you guys know it's like a vacuum, and nature abhors a vacuum. So this vacuum of unknowingness, stopping with the deciding, categorizing, owning, having, telling, reaching, grabbing, pushing. If we stop, that silence to the ego self feels like what they call the void. And it will feel like, whoa, gotta feel it, gotta feel it, gotta feel it. Get back to the self that I know. Backtrack, backtrack, backtrack. Maybe some of you know. I remember I just would get push up against that void and it'd be like, maybe, maybe not. It's awfully no thing. No thing. But what we don't realize is this is natural. We go to sleep every night. We don't even worry about it. We go completely offline. It's completely natural. Or we get awestruck in nature and we're not there. There's no me. There's no me. It's stopped. It happens all the time. If you're embracing somebody you deeply love, gone. The me is gone, and then it's got to like recreate itself. You know, when you wake up in the morning and it's like, that's such a precious doorway. Everything is open, and then it's like, oh, I'm this person, I do this, it's this day, I do that, it's da, 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 da. All of it just starts like reforming around open awareness. So this void, this vacuum that feels so frightening is natural. And we have other instances of it in our experience all the time. And then that is filled, that emptiness is filled. It's filled with whatever you call that which can't be named: spirit, the ground, uncaused love. The creative power, the power of the eternal now, the holy instant. Just 1 second of stopping. And that becomes the practice, the devotion, what some people call it a discipline. You know, different words work differently and better for different makeups, you know? Like discipline sounds really scary and too hardcore for like some people, but like really works for some people. Devotion is like abstract and doesn't work for some people, but is some people's total, you know. But it's a matter of attention and kind of allegiance in a way. Like, I mean, I really was, this was really coming in today, that it's almost like a recovery program, the addiction to the separate self, you know? I think that's why like 12 steps resemble kind of, you know, a spiritual path. The sense of a separateness, the sense of division, some kind of story that promotes opposition, position, belief will come generally when you're right there, right there at the, what some people call the void. It's never felt like a void to me. It, before I knew any of this and was a spiritual teacher and all the rest, and was just experiencing all of this in my little town in Eastern Oregon, I called it the great no thingness. And it was as liberating as anything could ever be. It was like, it did not feel like a cold void or an empty, you know, it was just no thing, no thing. And so it was everything all at once, limitless, limitless. It's the biggest relief of all time. Unimaginable relief to let all of that go and realize it never, ever meant anything. Um, I read a book. Um, I've read it a couple of times at this point. by a woman named Immaculée Eba or something like that. It's Rwandan, so I can't really pronounce it. It's called Left to Tell, Finding God in the Midst of the Rwandan Holocaust. She and 8 other women survived the Holocaust in Rwanda in a bathroom the size of our bathrooms, 8 people. A Protestant minister shielded them from the opposing tribe. I can't remember if she was Hutu or the other one, or but whatever. Her whole family was massacred with machetes in front of her eyes, and she ran to this pastor's house, and she and 8 other women hid her and 8 other women in this bathroom where they spent, I don't know, it was like 4 or 5 months. And she had a very deep relationship with the Divine Mother, Mother Mary specifically, and she prayed her rosary all day, every day in that little tiny hell after watching her family become murdered by her neighbors and friends. They were all neighbors and friends. It was all just a big togetherness until it wasn't. And she had a full awakening in this hell. And she became love. She became forgiveness. She was no longer doing it. It was flowing as her. And so when they came out, many, many miracles happened because of the level of consciousness, really, the awakened consciousness. Invisibility, really. Actually, I mean, things that are not conceptually understandable. So they finally get out of there, and many miracles have happened, and they're in the back of a truck. The French have come, and the French are evacuating them, and they run into a mob of very young boys with machetes, and the truck has to stop, and the Frenchman ditches them. He says, you just all get out. He just leaves them to be murdered by the machete mob. And all that comes to her in that moment is, Father, forgive them. They know not what they do. And they were able to just walk through. The people just like dropped their machetes because it wasn't something she was doing, see? She couldn't see it anymore. She couldn't see the them. There was no more them for her. That was over in her life. There was no more them. This is real. It just happened, 1992. The spiritual power that has been so kind of poo-pooed by our intellectual Westernness is reality. And this other stuff is an endless display that can just keep on going forever, I guess, as long as we all are into it. But it started for her with God, because she related to that word. God, I know you are limitless, and I know I am in your image, and therefore I am too. Please help me see beyond this. Please help me see beyond this. Please help me see beyond this. I know this is not the reality. It's kind of like, are our problems going to be solved at the same level they were created? Or are we going to have to ascend, transcend the levels of consciousness, as Dr. Hawkins would say, and let go of victimhood, let go of separation, let go of all of it, relinquish everything I mean, the times that this guy lived in were intense. Like, he was one step from death at all times, and he finally died before they could put him to death because he was such a heretic. Riots and division, and he was just steadfastly in the wake of the church telling him hell no. He was steadfastly, you are that, you are that, you are that, I am that. So that's a lot of talking. I'm going to go ahead and read something else from him. I mean, like, it was a lot of talking. I don't know how much it made, how much sense it made. What I'm trying to say is that if we see division and we have a strong sense of us and them, we need to sit down and get quiet and listen and find, uncover, open the curtains to what is always here, always here, always here, always here. Because division begins with the way we see. Listen into the wilderness. I just love the title of that. Listen into the wilderness. So, you want to meet God and hear the eternal word? Desiring this will take you on a journey into the heart of now. But to arrive, you must first let go of yourself. Abandon what you expect and hope for. Do you hear that? Like, hope is a subtle argument with reality. Like, abandon what you expect and hope for. And when you've emptied yourself of this, you'll have room for God to come to you, but not as you imagined. Don't expect great fanfares or grand gestures. Listen into the wilderness within. Love yourself boldly, beyond all that you've done well or failed to do, and begin now. I love that.